our keynote speaker left his home in Canada to play hockey at the University of Minnesota and earn a business degree. We are happy to say that he's been here ever since. His hockey career did not end at the U. He was selected to captain the 1968 U.S. Olympic hockey team and returned to play 10 years for the North Stars. He would go on to take roles as coach and general manager and president of the North Stars. Our keynote has an extensive broadcast career as well, including the Stanley Cup, Olympics, NCAA, Frozen Four, and Boys State High School Hockey Tournament. He still does 2 radio shows a week. He's in the U.S. Hockey Hall of Fame, the U of M Hockey Hall of Fame, and the Minnesota Hockey Hall of Fame. And on top of that, in 1991, he began his career in asset management and has been with RBC Global Asset Management since 1995. We were lucky that we could actually fit into his schedule because Lou Nanny is a busy, busy guy. Lou Nanny, please come up.
Thank you very much, Kelsey. It's a real pleasure to be here today. She asked me to talk to you today a little about the similarities of sports and business and the characteristics of that are required for success in coaching and managing as well. And you know those characteristics very well. They're leadership, teamwork, commitment, and passion. Whenever we see people who are successful, we know that they are committed to their sport or their work. They're passionate about becoming the best that they can be, and they are team players. Now, no team is composed entirely of perfect people. I think that's something we got to be aware of, because whether you are a superstar or journeyman, you're an important member of the team. That's why individuals working together as a group make a team successful. The success of any team or any company, really be it in sports or business, is dependent on every person working towards a common goal. And a coach needs to communicate the vision, and they should communicate that vision frequently, always updating as to where they are and where they need to be. Even as changes are made, you have to be letting people know just what the situation is, because every now and then you're going to get one that could surprise you. But the truly great teams are committed to excellence in everything they do. The goal is to achieve at the highest level. A successful team cannot have members who are not committed to excellence, because in the end, they will become the weak link. We must all be committed. If you're uncommitted, you're going to be unprepared, uninvolved, and then definitely unsuccessful. As Steve Jobs, the founder of Apple, once said, good things in business are never done by one person. They are always done by a team of people. And the role of every team member, no matter how seemingly insignificant, is valuable to the team's overall success. Success doesn't come from what you do occasionally. Success comes from what you do consistently. It's very important that there is an acceptance of roles. People have specific jobs, tasks, and positions. And although they should be willing, to stretch themselves, they won't be effective or helpful if they insist on going outside the boundaries of what that team really needs from them or what that company needs from them. The leader or coach can make a big difference in this, because motivation is not getting people to do what you want them to do. Motivation is getting people to want to do what you want them to do. You cannot push anybody up the ladder unless they are willing to climb, but you can get people to climb by using praise, because people really thrive on praise. Encourage your people to be self-starters, and yourselves. The pep talks, the push, the inspirations, all got to come within to keep you going hour after hour, day after day. I'm going to give you an example of a pep talk that didn't work. Back in 1972, Bernie Boom Boom Jeffrion took over the Atlanta Flames. They were an expansion team, and they lost 5 games in a row, and they went into Boston to play the Stanley Cup winning Boston Bruins the year before. Losing 5 games in a row, you got to get them fired up. So he says, I don't understand why you guys don't think we can beat this team. Who they got on that team? I don't trade none of my player for any other player. Then he thinks about it. Or Esposito, Busick. Well, maybe 4 or 5. Remember this when you think about teamwork. It's amazing what you can accomplish if you really don't care who gets the credit. Perhaps the best example I ever heard of teamwork is about mules. You might have heard this one before, but I love it. Salesman's driving down a 2-lane highway late at night in a rainstorm, and he gets stuck in a ditch. He sees a farmhouse, goes over and gets the farmer to come over and help him out. Farmer hitches up his blind mule to the salesman's car and hollers, "Pull, Sam, pull." And his blind mule's named Elmo. Then he says, "Pull, Bessie, pull." Nothing happens. "Pull, Jackson, pull." Nothing happens. He finally says, "Pull, Bessie, pull," and Bessie rips that car right out of the ditch. And the guy looks at the farmer and says, "I don't understand. Why did you call all those other names?" He says, "Look, if you didn't think he had any help, you wouldn't even try to get it out." So I would tell my players, you have to play as a team and you got to work and pull together. I wasn't asking them to go out to dinner with each other, but I was asking them to be one while they were in the locker room. Great coaches know how to work with people despite their feelings for the player, and managers despite their feeling of the person in the team. Scotty Bowman was the greatest coach in the National Hockey League. He won more Stanley Cups than anybody else. But I guarantee you that if he wanted to go fishing, 90% of the players wouldn't go with him, maybe 100. And he probably wouldn't want to go with them either. But team members got to be committed to excellence at every level. Every team works best when their team members have clearly defined and understood roles, because success depends not merely on how well you do things you enjoy, but how conscientiously you perform those duties you don't like. There's only one place to go for those that coast, and that's downhill. Good athletes succeed because they perform consistently and unfailingly when others would quit. And we should all know that opportunity often comes disguised as hard work. Pros can't worry about the mistakes they make because they will be ineffective. And you shouldn't worry about failure, because if you worry about failure, you're going to miss chances that you should really have. You got to remember this: no matter what you do, where you are, and if anything, when you're having problems communicating with kids on your teams, if you're coaching, remind them that their ability is their security. I always tell people when they lose their job, if they're worried about it, I said, your ability is your security. If you got ability, you got security. That's why one shouldn't worry about making mistakes. You're a member of a team because you're good, you're talented. When you feel confident, you act confidently, and confidence is really the result of preparation. And this acts to your believability, both in business and by your performance as an athlete. Michael Jordan could miss 6 shots in a row. At the end of the game, you knew he wanted to take the last shot and he was going to take it. Batting champs are out 2/3 of the time. Did you ever realize and notice that losers are really quick to give up and make excuses for their failure, where winners always have alternate plans? The people who are successful today take these failures and turn them around into the next step. Remember, one must never permit failure to become a habit. We have to have the proper attitude. A person's mental attitude has an unbelievable effect on their physical and psychological being. If you want others to believe in you, you must believe in yourself first. When I'm selling, I really feel like I'm going in there to do somebody a favor. And if they don't want it, that's their tough luck. This will help contribute to the success of your company or team and help you build chemistry, which we all know is a very important part of teamwork. When you have chemistry, everyone becomes more effective, more caring, more interested in their coworkers or teammates' success. We all got different personalities, skills, and agendas, but we have to work together to achieve a common goal. And it's easier to do so when you know what makes the other person tick. Obviously, workers and players are not paid alike on a team or a company. But one of the most important statements a worker should remember is do your job. Do your job, whatever it is. Because we have a saying in hockey: players play, coaches coach, and managers manage. Let me tell you about somebody who knew his job. John Ferguson, when I played, was an enforcer. He really took care of everybody else that tried to get near his teammates or upset him in any way. He knew his job and he never forgot it. In the summer, if he's walking down the street, and it just so happens that a guy from another team during the regular season was walking the same side of the street, he'd cross over. He didn't want to talk to him, didn't want to know him, didn't want to have any feelings for him, because he knew he might have to beat the hell out of him one day. Some players come into our league, as a crusher. They score a couple goals, and they want to be a rusher, and the next thing you know, they're an usher. They forget to do their job. Individuals with different personalities, different approaches, and different values succeed not because one set of values or practices is superior, but because their values and practices are genuine. And everyone should have personal goals and commit to them. You've probably heard a lot of times your goals should really be specific, measurable, attainable, and with a timeline. This will help you realize the incredible potential within yourself and get your If you're coaching, get your kids to set goals for themselves. Working towards specific goals will give people direction, and you know what? It'll also provide urgency in their work. You'll notice, though, that passion runs through everything there is on a winning team or a successful corporation. Passion is a common ingredient of all successful sports teams and companies. It's an underlying characteristic really binds the people together. When a member develops passion, it carries over into their personal life. You really care more about one another. People care more about one another when they're passionate. They feel more responsible. And for their teammate and their coworker, they know them better. They really have a situation where they develop an empathy for everyone. Passion really helps each of us develop intelligent ignorance. And that's an ingredient that really makes the seemingly impossible possible. When you're passionate, you never get outworked. Your job is fun. You always have the proper attitude. And your attitude is going to develop or really determine your altitude. The way you feel and act is going to be really instrumental in where you end up. Have the proper attitude, want to be the best, and don't quit even when events don't go as planned. Passion really gives one the desire to bounce back through failure, through tough times. We should all know that success is not permanent, but neither is failure. Passion is the one ingredient that moves a person from mediocrity to excellence. And when you're playing the Stanley Cup playoffs, you're watching this time of the year, you'll notice. You learn quickly. You're going to play with pain. You're going to play through people. You're not going to back up. You're not going to back down. You can really feel the passion in the room. It's like a heavy curtain hanging over everybody. There's an unbelievable feeling in the locker room. The only one I had comparable was when I was playing the Olympics, playing for our country against another country. Losing is not an alternative. Really, it's reminiscent of what Herb Brooks told his team, the Finnish team after the second period. They were losing. Everybody thought the Russians was the big game, which it was. But had they lost that Finnish game, they wouldn't have won a gold medal. And after 2 periods, they're trailing. He says, you lose this game, you'll take it to your grave. And he was right. They weren't going to lose. Just want to tell you, a man was having a conversation one time with a pastor, and he says, you know, I'd really like to know the difference between heaven and hell. So the pastor leads the man to this 2 doors, and he opens one, and the guy looks in the door, looks in the middle of this large room. In the middle of the large room was a large round table. In the middle of the table was a large pot of stew which smelled just delicious and made the man's mouth water. And he looked around the table and he saw all these people sitting around. They were sickly and appeared to be starving. They were holding spoons with very large handles that were strapped to their arm. And each found it possible to reach into that pot of stew. But because the handle was too large for their arms, they couldn't get the spoon back in their mouth. The man shuddered and he says, he looked at all the misery. Can't you help him, Pastor? Pastor said, you've seen hell. Then he took him to the next room, which was the same size room, large table, large pot of stew, people sitting around there, long-handled spoons strapped to their arms. But they were laughing and they were plump and they were having a good time. And, you know, the man says, I don't understand. And the pastor said, it's simple. It requires but one skill. They've learned to feed each other. The greedy only think of themselves. That's called teamwork. Thank you very much.
Actually, Lou, I'm going to call you back up to take a seat on our panel. We're not going to let you go just yet. You know, our coaches training through PCA, it instills these values in kids and coaches. And that's what our training is all about. And that's what this organization is all about. You know, I think you've all had probably some experiences that weren't great with youth sports. And PCA wants to turn that around, make sure that kids and coaches and parents are having a good experience. So let's get our panel discussion rolling. Our panel moderator today, we're so lucky to have Mark Rosen in the house. Many of you know that Mark Rosen has had a storied career with CCO, covering and living iconic moments in Minnesota sports history. He actually joined WCCO as a junior in high school and was hired full-time as a student at the while he was a student at the U. In his time, he anchored every evening newscast starting on weekends and then getting promoted to weekdays. And in 1981, he started hosting his Sunday night show with Vikings wide receiver Ahmad Rashad. And what started as the Rashad Rosen Report later became Rosen's Sports Sunday. And we hope the panel discussion here today feels like an extension of that show. Mark says the biggest highlight of his career was covering that miracle on ice hockey game in the 1980 Olympics in Lake Placid. So if you have time, check out Mark's book, Best Seat in the House, covering everything from his early years at WCCO to his favorite interviews, and there are a lot of them. Mark and his wife, Denise, have 2 grown children, Nick and Chloe, and he's on the board of directors for Children's HeartLink and the Athletes Committed to Educating Students. He's a regular on K-Fan as well, appearing on the Power Trip Morning Show Tuesday through Thursday, and with the Common Man at 2 p.m. Monday through Thursday. So even though you're sort of retired, you're still working a lot. So Mark Rosen, come on up. And Lou, we're going to have you come back up and take a seat, and we'll get our panel discussion underway.
Thank you, Kelsey. I can't imagine anyone wanting to work till 11:15 at night. What is wrong with you? That's crazy. Well, if we could have, we're going to get the podium off here. And I know everyone's kind of on a tight time schedule, so we want to make sure we keep the program going here. But in the meantime, maybe we should invite the rest of our panelists up here. Ethan Casson, come on up, and Justin Morneau, Matt Berg, please come on up. Carrie Barron, come on up as well, and we'll introduce these fine men and women to discuss. We have quite a illustrious group up here, to say the least. I'll do some quick introductions, then we'll ask some questions, and hopefully we'll be a very engaging conversation. Ethan Casson, down, say a wave with Ethan. Ethan's finishing his 3rd season as the CEO for the Minnesota Timberwolves, the Minnesota Lynx, the Iowa Wolves, which is the Wolves G League team. Prior to his current role, he served as the Chief Operating Officer for the San Francisco 49ers, among other roles. Since his arrival, the Wolves have seen tremendous growth in season tickets, attendance, corporate sponsorship, and other areas. And the Lynx, of course, recently named WNBA Franchise of the Year for the 2nd straight season. We know all about their success. Casson worked his way up from the ground level, doing a number of internships throughout college to help him in his pursuit of working in sports management. Shortly after college, he grabbed the media guide and started calling every NBA team in hopes of getting some sort of entry-level job. The Wolves answered. Casson sold everything he owned, including his car, to get to Minnesota to start the job, and now he is back where it all started. What a success story. Ethan, that's amazing. Justin Morneau needs pretty much no introduction. Of course, drafted by the Twins back in 99 and played 14 seasons in the major leagues, 11 with the Twins. The former first baseman was named the American League's most valuable player in 2006. He played a key role on 3 different Twins American League Central Division championship teams, 4-time All-Star, over 1,200 games in a Twins uniform, hitting .278, 221 home runs, 860 RBIs. And then in 2018, Justin joined the Twins front office. His responsibilities include helping player development by teaching MLB expectations, environment, and culture. He's also involved in the amateur draft process, and this year he served as an expanded role as Fox Sports North analyst for Twins television broadcast. I just told Justin when I got here what a great job he has been doing with the Twins, and how much, as a baseball nut I am, I've learned listening to Justin on those broadcasts. I know he's taking a little bit of time off right now for family reasons. When he retired from baseball, he said, quote, "I was fortunate to live my dream every day. It wasn't taken for granted to achieve that goal, and that dream is really something special." The guy sitting next to me, Matt Berg, I think is what, the 4th or 5th best athlete from Cretin-Derham Hall. I can't remember right now. I lose the list. I don't have it on my sheet here.
Just go quickly. They don't care.
Okay, all right. Super Bowl champion Matt Berg, 15-year veteran of the National Football League, and go on and on about this guy. Former director of football development for the NFL, currently serves as special assistant to the NFL. A native of St. Paul, Matt was drafted by the Vikings in the 1998 season, was a key offseason acquisition by the Baltimore Ravens, 6-time NFL Pro Bowl selection. I'm getting exhausted reading all this. He was also the recipient of the 2011 Walter Payton NFL Man of the Year Award for his excellence off the field, including his commitment to education for the Hike Foundation that he founded. He also launched the Ready, Set, Read program in the Baltimore area public schools. A graduate of Harvard University with a degree in economics, Matt is the founder and CEO of Matt Berg and Company, LLC. He speaks to a number of organizations across the country about the dynamics of teamwork, leadership, and inspiration. Nice to have Matt here. Carrie Barron has been coaching and making a difference in kids' lives for the past 25 years. In 2017, she was selected to receive the inaugural Junior NBA Coach of the Year award among nominees from across the country. Every NBA team nominated a local coach who made an impact on children, and Barron was chosen by the Wolves and the Lynx Academy as someone who represented the best in Minnesota. She was also honored with the PCA Positive Impact Award in 2017. Barron played volleyball, basketball, softball at Centennial High School, and then went on to play Division I basketball at LaSalle. She was president of the Egan Athletic Association Basketball Board, managing in-house and travel programs that included more than 1,000 athletes. She started her coaching career while still in high school in 1994 as the coach of her sister's Silver Bullet softball team. She has coached hundreds of athletes in basketball, volleyball, baseball, and softball in her career. Her and her husband, Matt, have 4 children. I think a couple of them are here today. I had a chance to meet when you first came in here, and they live in the Egan community. So let's have a nice round of applause for all of our guests here today. So Louis, let's start with you, and I want to kind of segue from what you were talking about at the end, and our good friend, the late great Herb Brooks, and back in 1980, you had a hand in hiring him to be the coach, and we always think about those college kids that we grew up watching, facing arguably the best team in the world, the Russians at that time. And how did you know that Herbie was the right guy for the job at that particular time?
Well, actually, at that time, I was trying to hire Herbie for the North Stars to coach. I was manager of the North Stars, and I had got started. Herbie and I played in the Olympic team together, and I was coaching university freshmen at the time. And on our last trip coming home, I said, look, I'm going to quit because I'm going to turn pro after the Olympics. I said, you got to take my job. He said, I don't want to be a coach. I said, you'll be a great coach. You got to take the job. So I talked to Marsh Ryman and saw him, we hired him at the U, and then he went from freshman coach, then he wins 3 cups at NCAA, and he was really good. And so when I was looking for a coach, when I took over the North Stars, I tried to hire Herb. We negotiated for 2 weeks, and he said to me, Louis, look, I really want to coach the Olympic team, not the pros. I can coach the pros later. Get me the job. You know, Walter Bush is the chairman, and you're on the committee. So we'd already offered a Jackie Parker, who turned it down, believe it or not. And then, so I said, okay, there's an opportunity. I called Walter, and Walter talked to the board, and Herbie got hired. And we knew that, you know, he was doing such a great job with college kids, and that's what you were going to play with, and that's what he would have to get ready. Now, did we know he was going to win? No. Are you kidding yourself? We played him 99 times. He beat us again. But he did the job because he was able to communicate with those college kids to get them to a level to compete against the Russians and in the same kind of conditioning, which didn't happen. And that's why he was so successful.
Well, it's interesting because it was, like you mentioned, Scotty Bowman. He made sure that the players looked at him as sort of the enemy. He didn't want to be their friend.
And Herbie was the same. You're right.
Yeah, he was exactly the same. How would you describe for parents and coaches to create this positive impact and positive environment for kids to flourish today in this very stressful world that they're under, where it seems like it's kind of a win-at-all-costs feeling?
Well, you're right about the atmosphere today, and I think it's different. And that's why when you're a college coach and you have sort of a captured audience that they can't move, you can be tough and maybe not as communicative as you have to be. But when you're talking about developing kids as youngsters, the one thing you have to remember more than anything, as a coach, you have to make it fun for them. You have to give them the opportunity to have fun. You have to remember that most of these kids are not going to make it to the pros, and the ones that do are going to go through tough times. Even if they're stars, they're going to have a tough time. What carries a guy through, say he's playing hockey and he has to go to the minor sometime or before he goes to the major, or you're moving around and traded, it's always the love of the game. So you have to make sure you have these kids enjoying themselves and having fun so that they develop a love for the game that's going to carry them through the tough times. You got to be more communicative than we were in the old days, and you have to have a relationship with them where they can believe you, trust you, and really want to perform for you, not only themselves. Just like I was talking about, you know, it's so important to have that passion. They want to have the passion for everyone.
Matt, I know as well-rounded as you are and been involved in this community for so many years, and now the father of 8, I believe.
I think so.
And counting. As a parent, it's a whole different rule, but I guess it kind of goes back to what kind of role your parents played in your life and your siblings' life when it came to sports and education, and how that helped form the person you are today.
Yeah, it was just a different time. I mean, I was not a great athlete. That's why I became a lineman. I mean, nobody chooses to play offensive line. You kind of try everything else, and then you're not good at it. But it was a different time, where it was just kind of you just played. You just played at the rec center. You did a lot more just playing outside. You kind of heard about a travel team here or there, an all-star team. I was never involved in those. You just played. There's always just a place for every kid to play, and that's what it was about. And obviously things have changed, not for the better, but it was for me personally, it was just not being a super talented youth athlete, and I knew I wasn't, and it never bothered me, because I just wanted to play. I was just a kid.
I want to ask maybe all the panelists sort of the same question, because it's as someone who covered high school sports for many, many years, and many times we, and I say we on our station and other stations, end up covering the big schools, the teams that win all the time, and they get a lot of the publicity. And I think the schools I'm talking about. But I guess my question, Matt, from a football standpoint, when you see kids that are participating in city schools or whatever, that these kids are out there every single day not getting that kind of recognition. They may have 20 players that suit up every day. What kind of message is there to stay at it? And it doesn't mean they're going to be any less successful than the kid who's playing at the big school.
Yeah, I think you kind of what Louis talked about. You just have to enjoy the process and just playing, just being out there competing. I think if you play for your school, that's a special thing to be able to represent your school. I mean, that should be enough. That's what it should be about. And then whether you win or lose or all that stuff, that just happens. But sports, it shouldn't be a means to that end. It shouldn't be about the championship or the scholarship. I think those are always byproducts of a very healthy process. And you talk about help kids develop a love for the game. You can't force kids to love the game. You can't force them to love sports. I can't force my kids to love football. So everybody finds their thing, right? And the ones that end up making it to the elite levels, I think they have elite talent, which you can't do anything about, and 2, they have that intrinsic motivation, that love that they'll just keep doing it, keep practicing, keep persevering. But just being out there playing, competing, giving it your best effort, that is enough.
Kerry, I remember we did a program called Sports for the Right Reason, and I think when kids stop having fun, when they stop having fun with the kids they grew up with, and doing it, they maybe that's when they drop out of sports. What have been your experiences with kids you've coached, and sort of what lessons you've learned over the last couple of years about how to keep kids involved and having fun more than, as Matt mentioned, the winning and the losing?
Yeah, sure. I think having fun is the key, especially when you start them so young. We start kids pretty young now, even in traveling sports, and they have to make it all the way through high school and some on to college. That's a long time to play a sport. So I think it's important you've got to go in as a coach and be prepared for your season. You need to come in with a plan. You need to make sure that your plan has fun and skills and life lessons all mixed into that plan. Because you want kids to come and give their best effort every time they step out on the court. You want to do that, but even as adults, it's sometimes hard to do that. We need a little bit of a rah-rah and a little bit of cheer. So as a coach, you need to do that as well. You need to make sure that you're setting up those practices, setting up that whole season, and being ready to teach them the things that they need and motivate them to want to come every day and have fun. If they're having fun, they're going to sign up the next year.
How do you feel about in this world of specialization we have right now, about kids making sure they participate in more than one sport? They're not just going to every summer camp, every elite camp, whatever it might be. You could be a great athlete, but making sure you spread it around a little bit.
That's the question. I think that's our biggest issue right now in youth sports, is that kids are specializing so early, and it's hard on their bodies, it's hard on their psyche. They get tired of going to the same thing all the time. We people like variety. That's important. So I think coaches always will say, yeah, we want multi-sport athletes, but then when you're actually that coach of that sport, you don't want anyone to miss your practice, when you're there. So that's tough. I think as coaches, there are a lot of people earlier that raised their hands that they're youth coaches out here. You, as a coach, you need to recognize that it's good for kids to play other sports. They might miss your practice sometimes. That's okay. They're out doing good things. We need, as coaches and youth coaches, to support those kids playing other sports. And then when they're with you, again, keep it as fun as possible. Don't make them feel bad for missing at all. Reinforce that message that it's okay to play other things. It's so good for their bodies. It's so important. It actually, and I honestly really believe that sports, it crosses, you can play multiple sports, and the skills that you learn in one are going to benefit you in the other. So if you have a more well-rounded athlete, you're going to get better performance on the court than them only knowing those skills for that sport anyway.
Ethan, you have, as I mentioned, a remarkable personal story about finding your way here to Minnesota and at this level. What drove you? I think we heard Louis' speech talking about just what it takes to be successful in any line of work, but what kept you pushing the envelope down and the pedal down in your pursuit of where you eventually ended up here today as the CEO of the Timberwolves?
Well, I sold my car, so the driving part was
couldn't put the pedal down anymore.
A slight challenge. But just to piggyback a little bit on what Matt and Carrie have alluded to, I played basketball my entire life. I'm the son of a coach. My dad's father coached. His dad's father coached. All of my brothers played college basketball. So we were around the game. I almost look at my career in almost two chapters. Chapter one was 20 plus years of playing basketball at a number of different levels. I wasn't good enough to play at a professional level, and I recognized that during that window of time in college. But I applied everything that I learned at the youth level and everything that I learned in every stage of my basketball career, and I applied those attributes to the next chapter of my life, which is how do I get into professional sports? And there was really two tracks for me. At least I thought there were two tracks for me. One would be the coaching route, and the other would be, could I potentially have a role inside of a front office? And so what drove me and what led me even to Minnesota to begin my career as a glorified paid intern was all the things that I learned the previous 20 years, every practice, every off season, every game, every achievement, every miss, every opportunity, the teamwork, the dynamics that happen in and around youth sports and all the way through high school and college. If you can apply those same attributes to the next stage of your career, I oftentimes find people, when we're interviewing, we're asking questions, did you play sports? At what level did you play sports? And it's amazing how transferable so many of the things that, not only this alliance and association represents, but can carry on and transfer into the next stage of your life.
And Justin, knowing what you've learned throughout your excellent Major League Baseball career, what would you tell a younger Justin Morneau about what's important and what's not?
It depends on the age, I guess. But for myself, I think the older version of myself, the one that played here, I would just say enjoy it a little bit more, because as you're going through it, you assume it's going to last forever. I assumed I would still be playing. I never thought that I would be on TV before I turned 40. I mean, every young player assumes you're going to have this long career. It's going to go on forever. And I didn't really enjoy some of the moments early in my career. I just assumed they were going to continue to happen. The All-Star game, that kind of stuff. When you're in it and you're in the room and you're surrounded by, you're looking across and there's Derek Jeter and David Ortiz and Ichiro, and you're in this room and it's kind of surreal because you're wondering how you got there. I'm looking around wondering if someone's going to come and, kick me out of the room. How'd you get in here? So I'm sitting there, and the first one obviously was special, but then going along and assuming these moments were going to continue to happen, I had an injury in the middle of my career, and actually that injury helped me appreciate the second half of my career probably more than the first half, which was, a lot more successful personally, accolades, all that kind of stuff. But I was able to enjoy the game. I was able to enjoy every time I ran out of the dugout after that. I appreciated it that much more. I looked up, I took it in, because I always knew after going through and missing so much time that every game really could be my last game. You never think of that when you're 21 or 22 years old. You assume it's just going to continue, and you just sort of go through, running out of the dugout, you do all that kind of stuff. Well, as I got into the latter part of my career, I was able to just take in those moments, enjoy the little things that went on, the battles between you and the pitcher, all that kind of stuff. So I think I was able to do that in the latter part of my career. I wish I could have took a step back and enjoyed it as I was going through it, but it's hard to do it because you start to see yourself as being satisfied with what's going on. You feel like you're going to lose that edge maybe as you're going through it. So I was able to do that. Now, could I have smiled a little bit more when I was younger? Could I have appeared to enjoy it? I was enjoying it, but I could have, outwardly maybe enjoyed it a little bit more. But, I was thankful that I had the opportunity to have at least some time on the field where I was able to take in every moment and really try to set it in as a memory.
One other quick question, maybe other panelists can weigh in as well, because we were talking before we walked in here about baseball is a game of failure. I mean, the greatest players in the world end up in the Hall of Fame fail, 7 out of 10 times. If you want to look at it that way, using that word literally. But in terms of kids today, learning how to deal with failure, no matter what sport they're playing, it's not always easy because everybody wants to be the best. Everyone wants to succeed at it. What lessons do you have to them as far as understanding how to battle through using that word? Because it's kind of it has its negative connotations to it. You failed at something. Well, you really didn't fail at it, did you? I mean, it's just you had to keep trying.
Well, it's only a failure if you fail to learn from it. But so for me, my dad was a very tough coach, but at the same time, I watched him with my son last summer for the first time, and it took me back to when I was his age. And he's hitting with them, and the way he could make you feel like you were 10 feet tall when you did something right is something that was so special to see, because I saw he was tough. I mean, he didn't accept anything less than your best effort, which I think is a good attribute of a good coach. But I think sometimes we get stuck in being positive means being nice all the time, or obviously you want to treat kids well, but it's okay to tell a kid if he's not working hard enough, hey, this isn't going to get it done. Now, you're not going to sit there and scream at a 5-year-old, obviously. That's not going to be effective. But to be able to correct things that they're doing wrong, but also back it up with something positive, I think is important. Positivity, enthusiasm are 2 huge things to make a coach, really draw in the players, gain the trust of his players, have that relationship where the coaching can actually happen if there is that trust between the player and the coach. So I learned a lot of things from my dad. He was tough, but he was also one of the most positive coaches you could ever have been around, and it helped me get to the level I did because he built me up to a point where even in my major league career, I could call him if I was going through a tough time, and he knew how to get me back on track, how to get me in the right mindset mentally to get myself back out there and face the best in the world and feel like I belonged on that field with him.
I was just going to say, I think part of the problem is, right, today we don't let our kids fail enough as parents, right? So that's where sports can be so important, and can be a good thing, right? Every time you step out onto the court or the field or the rink, you're vulnerable, right? And life, I mean, I don't know how you feel, Louis, but in my life, I feel like I fail more than I win. I mean, as a parent, my wife would definitely say I'm probably failing as a husband daily, a lot of ways. But but that's part of life, I mean, the failure, this negative connotation. I mean, how often as coaches are we coaching and we're getting wrapped and we want to win, and maybe we just take a step back and say, hey, if we don't win, or if a kid does fail in a certain situation, like it's not a bad thing, right? It's a great thing. It's a teachable moment, like Justin talked about. So again, I think it's just one more reason why youth sports are really important today. I always say it's one of the sports are one of the most important unimportant things, right? It's not your faith, it's not your family, it's not your work or your friends, but we can, when done right, we can gain a lot. Our kids can gain a lot from playing sports.
Justin, you wanted to add something?
Yeah, I think one of the things that I always go back to, 2005 was my first full season in the major leagues. I hit .239 for the whole year. It was the first year I faced major league competition every day, and I failed. I looked at that year as a failure, but then I look back on it now as the year that I learned more from that season than I did any other year in my career. I failed almost 80% of the time, but yet I had to continue going out there every day trying to battle against guys who were probably more experienced, a little older, guys who knew how to get me out, and I hadn't figured out how to go through that yet and how to deal with that failure. I spent many nights staring at the ceiling up until 2, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning trying to figure out what I was doing wrong, and I learned more from that season than I learned from any other year in my career, and 2006 ended up being a great year compared to 2005. But 2006 didn't start the same. It started the same way as 2005 did. I struggled for the first 2 months, but I had that experience of failure, what it was like to go through that, and I eventually turned it around. I got out of it, and I turned it into something positive. So I think you learn a lot more from your failures than you do from your successes.
Kerry, what should the focus of a youth coach be? I mean, right now in this day and age, as Matt was saying, it's a different time, and you have to adjust with the times. These kids are so involved in their video games and everything else going on. Getting their attention, keeping them focused is not as easy as it used to be.
No, it's definitely not as easy as it used to be. There's a lot that vies for our attention. So I think we've talked about a lot of the things Lou talked about. When you've got to make it fun for the kids. You've got to keep their attention. When you're coaching, it's important that you work on the skills. Like that's one of the things out there. You work on the skills. You teach them how to play the game, so that when they actually step out on the field, they step out on the court, that they have confidence. They know what they're supposed to do. They know their role. They embrace their role, and they walk out there knowing what their role is. So you teach them the skills. You teach them the things they know that they need to know on the court. Then you also need to teach them the why behind what they're doing. I think that's really important. If you're going to invite the kids to learn the strategy of the game, and let them. I had one time when I'm coaching my daughter Emma's basketball team. We're in a championship game, and the team we were playing against threw a zone on us, and we got into called a timeout, pulled the team in. Another girl on the team said, "Coach, can we try that play where we have the baseline runner?" And I said, "Sure." I gave her the clipboard. She drew up the play. How awesome is that? That's a win for a coach. Yeah. When you have the team strategizing, they're recognizing what's going on and they're strategizing. That was awesome. So you have that, and again, just bouncing back from mistakes, celebrating mistakes, knowing that if you're going to ask these kids to try new things and they make a mistake, you can't get mad about it. You have to be positive about it. Another time, I remember coaching Will's team. We had someone threw they were looking up the court. They threw a bomb down the court, totally missed the breakaway runner, and your reaction could be, oh, we could have had an easy layup, but the reaction we had was, hey, you were dribbling with your head up. You looked down the court.
You recognized it.
Oh, yeah. You saw it. So you can, even in the mistakes, you can find the positive in it, and that that kid's like, hey, I did some things right. I'm gonna try that again. So we don't want kids to be not confident. We don't want them to be scared when they go out on the court. And to do that, you have to celebrate those times that they try and they push themselves outside their comfort zone.
Just to add to that, and again, going back to the transferable approach, these are lessons that are being taught at a young age that can be applied for these kids as they become young adults, as they become first-time employees, as they become first-time managers. We oftentimes talk about, the locker room dynamic is very similar to the boardroom dynamic, right? If you're a basketball team made up of 12 players and a coaching staff, and in an NBA team, you're made up of 175 players and an executive staff. And there's so many lessons that are happening at such a young age. And you hope that those things are being instilled, will be applied generation after generation after generation. The words everybody's using up here are the words that a lot of these executives, front office folks that are out here in the audience are using with their staffs today. When you talk about first-time employees, when you talk about the first time you're managing people, when you talk about alignment, collaboration, teamwork, failure, right? Oftentimes failing, adversity. Those are all things that are happening that you hope the kids are hearing at a young age, and they're internalizing it, but then they're able to apply it to the next chapter of their life.
Interesting hearing from a lot of you, Matt. You're kind of poking fun at yourself. You weren't the best athlete, but sometimes they say that the people who show up for practice every day, you don't have to be the big star, end up being the people that end up getting hired by the people in this room because they're diligent enough to show up every day, support their teammates. You don't have to be the big star. Coaches can recognize that as well, but the feedback has to get back to the parents as well, that not everybody can be the star.
Yeah, I think talent's overrated, right? And I think a lot of times as kids in sports, in the youth sports world, some people, they almost place value, the kids' value on how talented they are or how good they perform, right? And that's not right. That doesn't speak to anything. Talent is God-given. It doesn't speak at all to your character, right? It's more your work ethic and what kind of teammates you are. And those are the things that we need to remember, even as parents, right? Like if our kid's out there and they're not one of the better ones, we feel like it somehow reflects poorly on us, and that has nothing to do with it, right? Especially in the youth sports world, it's nothing to do with it. It's just about, I would say it's not about, a lot of times we made about who's the best. It should just really about each kid doing their best, right? And we talk about failure, I think that lends itself to work ethic as well, right? Just being able to keep working, keep grinding, doing those things. I think that's what wins in life, whether it's your relationships or your business or whatever it is. You just have to have the ability to keep going.
And Louis, you certainly have seen that at the youth hockey level through your own grandkids, everyone else down the road, that not everybody can be on that first line. And what kind of lessons that you've imparted to others as well about just kind of sticking to it and don't worry about what line you're on?
Well, first of all, I guess you'd have to say you're telling them just to do their best and not worry about mistakes, because the last guy that made a mistake is on the cross, or went without making a mistake, I should say. Every one of us is going to make mistakes, and you have to be willing to sacrifice for the team. And just what Matt was saying, not everybody's going to be the star, but you have to know your position and do the best you can at that position. I'll tell you one thing that I want all of you to remember as a manager, because not only in sports but in business, you'll find out many times that the toughest people to handle are your best people. That's just the way it is. When we were going to Stanley Cup Finals, the day of our first game against the Islanders, Sonmore and I were having lunch, and I put some names on the paper, and I said, you know anything about these guys? What are you talking about? You know anything about these guys? They're all our players. I said, yeah, and one time or other, you wanted to trade every one of these guys during the year. And I told him, I said, I pay you to coach 4 guys. The other 16 can coach themselves. I can get a truck driver to come in, because they will work hard. They will do everything. And so you, as a coach, you have to remember that you have to handle people differently and be aware of the situation, and that's why you're coaching. But as kids, as individuals, you have to strive to do the best that you can do to contribute to what it is. As Matt says, talent is God-given. Not everybody's going to be the most talented, but you know what? Everybody can be the best worker, and that's where you have to aim for.
Well, we want to thank our panelists. Just an outstanding job. We could go on and on. It's a fascinating subject about where we all are as parents and coaches, and understanding what's important as we move on to the next generation here. So, Kelsey, thank you much for having me here today and being part of this wonderful panel. Thank you so much. Thanks.